So the cost of a crisis. So I wanted to start off by putting a few numbers around a certain type of crisis. Um, and this presentation is not solely about a cyber attack as a crisis. It's about any kind of crisis that affects an organization or affects a company's ability to do what they're there to do. But the question to start with is, how relevant do you feel a cyber attack is to your organization? So if I just talk about some figures from a bit of research that was done by a company or by a institute called Ponemon and Kaspersky, the antivirus company, Kaspersky Analysis. I've got the links to this research. If you're interested, just let me know. I can send you the links to the background to this analysis. So what they found was that per hour for a medium-sized company, and that's 250 to 1,000 employees, it can cost and sorry, this is in euros. The research was done in Europe. So it can cost 74,000 euros per hour in a cyber attack. So that's for a medium-sized company, 250 up to 1,000 employees. For a large enterprise, so anything above 1,000 employees, it can cost 700,000 euros per hour. Further, they looked at the usual recovery time, or how long the cyber attack impacted the business, and on average, they found that was 18.5 hours. So if we do the sums and actually look at the probability of remember this is a European study, the probability of a European organization being impacted by a cyber attack, it was actually 50% chance over 2 years. So if we multiply by 0.5, that gave them a potential damage from a cyber attack to an organization, like I say, in Europe, of 685,000 euros for one cyber attack that actually got through and impacted the company. And as the probability says here, that's for these size of organizations, the probability of that happening is 50% within 2 years. Again, I don't know of any study done in this part of the world, but it would be interesting to find out. I might look into that actually. So for a large company, obviously doing the sums, it's much larger. The monetary impact, 6.5 million euros for a crisis impacting a company from a cyber attack.
So let's talk about the chaotic nature of a crisis. A crisis can happen to any organization at any time and anywhere. But you as an organization, or you as an individual in a key role within an organization, can influence the impact of that crisis. A little bit of pre-planning, being structured and organized, can really help you cut through the chaos. So let's look at a specific crisis scenario now.
The chaotic nature of a crisis. So let's talk briefly about the natural chaos that can erupt as part of a crisis situation. A crisis, like I say, is really chaotic by nature, and that's obviously due to unexpected events, sudden and irregular changes of things happening. And time really is a key factor in gaining control and successfully managing a crisis. Organizations really talk now about owning a crisis and returning to business as usual as quickly as possible. Obviously, returning to business as usual as quickly as possible means less impact on the business, on the bottom line, on the reputation of the business or the organization. So I want you to think about how long it may take your company to gain control of an incident. So still talking about a cyber attack incident, imagine if a cyber attack hits your organization. It could be caused, as I'm sure there's experts on the call here, this could be caused by an employee mistakenly opening an email that's phishing for credentials, or phishing to get people to click on a link to install malware, whatever it might be, which results in the IT system being infected with a virus. These emails are becoming more and more sophisticated now. They look more and more like a real email from potentially a colleague or from an external partner, whoever it may be. And they're getting much more easy, or the potential of somebody within your organization clicking on an email like that is getting higher. So as part of that attack, that cyber attack, you may need to shut down your IT infrastructure to minimize the spread of a virus, or to just minimize the impact of that cyber attack. Or the cyber attack itself may take down your IT infrastructure and potentially your telephony. So your normal, let's call it your business communication, may be lost. So your normal, let's say your normal communication channels are then down. So your day-to-day methods of communication, both internally and externally, are no longer operational. So obviously this will certainly cause an immediate impact on your ability to provide your goods and services, or your service to your partners, to your clients. And it can impact your organization or impact your business potentially severely. It can also, of course, like I've mentioned, impact your ability to communicate, collaborate, and mobilize and respond to the crisis situation. So as a consequence, every passing minute can increase the potential negative impact on the company's reputation. So how do you alert the crisis team, or have a think about how would you alert the crisis team without email, without internal telephone, without landlines? How would you mobilize a response? How do you warn staff? So if you need to, for example, stop the spread of a cyber attack, of a suspicious email, and stop that spreading within an organization, how do you get that message very quickly to your staff to not use their email, or to not click on an email from a specific person or entity? How do you make sure that you have the latest information to communicate to staff? As I'm sure most of you know, having accurate, up-to-date information is crucial in making decisions on what to do next in a crisis situation. So how do you know who's been informed, or if the status of a certain task or action has changed? How can you coordinate the responsibilities of different departments? Is customer data at risk? Who informs the customer, if so, and when does that happen? And how do you keep your employees informed and updated? So have a think about those kinds of things. So how do you handle, or how could we handle a cyber attack without your company's IT infrastructure? So if you lost your company's or your organization's IT infrastructure, or you had to take it down because there was an issue, cyber attack or IT issue, let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So some of the typical challenges on how we handle a cyber attack or IT issue, the main challenges. So how do, and we kind of mentioned it just now, but how do you inform your employees about the danger and the IT shutdown? So you'll need to inform your employees what's happening. Will you be able to do this whilst your IT infrastructure is shut down, like we said? And to do this, you need an independent communications channel. So something outside, running in parallel to your normal business communications. You need something else running outside of that, outside of the walls of your organization, that is not affected and not linked to your IT infrastructure. So an independent communications channel that's not reliant on your own IT systems. Also, that system should be updated with your latest staff contact information so you can quickly and easily make contact with your staff if you need to. How can you make sure that you have reached every employee? So without an automated solution, it's really impossible to have a manual call cascade, just because that would take a long time, let alone trying to have a manual call cascade when you can't get into your IT system to find contact information. So how can you make sure that everyone is informed? So also having a two-way communication system, so you know that people have received your message, is key in this position as well. How do you coordinate tasks between different departments and keep crisis team members informed of the latest status at all times? So for a cyber attack and other crisis situations, it's usually not just one department that's impacted or needs to respond or needs to be mobilized. As well as IT, for example, it could be HR if staff are in danger, for example. It could be the board if they need to communicate with the TV or the radio or any other media to update on what's happening. So you need to work with lots of different departments and teams, but how can you coordinate with them and collaborate with them if your normal business communication systems are down? So how do you make sure that everyone takes the necessary steps, and how do you make sure that everyone knows their responsibilities and knows what they should be doing? Kids are home, if you can hear them. Anyway, how can you ensure that communication is smart and easy for everyone to use? So during a crisis, there are multiple information flows, and participants, and not everything is always relevant to everyone. So it's very important to communicate the right information or the right tasks to the right people, rather than more of a laser approach rather than a scattergun approach to the crisis. Remember, the key here is to keep things very clear and keep away from and try and minimize chaos in a crisis situation. So if we look at the solutions now to some of these, so first of all, so looking at how do we inform employees. So like we've talked about, have an external software as a service based communication solution. So software as a service, meaning that it's separate from your IT system. It's not linked, but it's quickly accessible from anywhere. So for example, if you need to evacuate a location, evacuate an office, you could still access that communication collaboration tool from a laptop in a cafe, for example. How can you make sure that you have reached every employee? Like I said, it's kind of having multiple modes of communication. So that could potentially be email, text message, voice call, even pager, fax if necessary, but it's smartphone app. It's having multiple channels of communication. So if you've lost a channel, let's say your email's not working, then you can still communicate with a voice call to a mobile device, for example. If that's not working, you could still maybe send data over cell networks, and you can still communicate via smartphone app. So it's having that redundancy, that multi-channel redundancy. Then how do we coordinate tasks? So having a lot of companies, a lot of organizations will run crisis management from a physical room. So why not have a digital online crisis management room for responding staff to use, and they can access that from anywhere at any time. And then lastly here, how do we ensure that communication is smart and easy for everyone to use? So a secure and structured communication platform. So even though it's a solution that's divorced from your IT systems, it's separate, it can still be secure and structured, and it can communicate very quickly and efficiently, because contact information is already in there pre-configured and it's ready to go to talk to the people you need to talk to resolve that crisis. We can liken the situation to a mountain of chaos. So the idea here really is to get on top of this mountain of chaos so that you get an overview of everything that's going on. So how do you manage justify the administration overhead of maintaining a parallel system? So that could be a couple of questions there. So maintaining it can be quite low overhead in terms of making sure. So for example, making sure contact information is up to date. That can potentially be done automatically from an HR system. So if an organization has an HR system in place where contact information for staff is kept up to date, then that can be linked with an external crisis communication system, crisis management system, so that is ready to go with the latest contact information from the HR system. So I don't know if that's where that question is angling. So this is kind of the core of the presentation. Thanks, Monique. So tracking information through changing circumstances is really one of the key challenges when you're managing a crisis. So like I said before, it's not just cyber attacks that can impact a business. So whether it could be a fire, a pandemic, as obviously we've all got used to over the last year and a half, or any other kind of incident. But to handle crisis situations, professionally, you really need to do several things well, and that is, you need to alert teams and employees efficiently. You need to communicate easily and securely. You need to manage and monitor tasks and events in a structured manner. So that's telling people what they need to do, or at least those people knowing what they need to do by getting a task at the right time, or a list of actions they need to perform that correspond to a certain crisis scenario. And then lastly, you normally would need to document everything so that you can audit and potentially have a record of how you performed in your last rehearsal or your last crisis situation, so that you can look at it and make improvements, or look at it and see what went well last time and repeat if it did go well. Or you may even need evidence in a court case or in a post-mortem exercise. So we'll have a little bit more of a look at communication and managing and monitoring tasks. So there's another way of managing crisis situations a little bit more effectively, and that's managing crisis situations within different levels within an organization. So we can look at different levels within an organization in a couple of ways. So you can talk about your strategic level. So that could be upper management, board level. You have your tactical level, which usually is the level that looks after a crisis situation, not always, but it is potentially the crisis management level, and then the operational level. So maybe the emergency response on site that are actually looking after people first, helping people with first aid, whatever it might be, depending on the crisis. So let's have a quick look at an example of how that may work. So just looking at a very basic example of how a grocery, so like a Countdown or a New World might be dealing with something in terms of a supply chain issue, let's say in a COVID situation where people are buying up stock in a certain product line. So pasta, I think, was one that we ran out of in first lockdown. but anyway, so in this kind of situation, the headquarters or the management team all they may be interested is what's going on, and just tell us if something changes. So they're kind of focused on that area. So they just want to know what's going on, so they can tell the media if they need to, or they can report to shareholders or whatever it might be. That they just need to know what's going on in this situation. The regional management, so let's say the management in Wellington might want to know is whether they need to increase the order volumes of that certain product, or whether they need to go to alternative suppliers to get more of that product into the grocery store. At the actual grocery store, so the local New World, they may need to actually track the stock more closely, so that they can report up to regional management more frequently per day, for if they need more pasta to be ordered. So, not the most realistic example, but it kind of just illustrates quite nicely how different levels within an organization potentially need to know different information, or need to respond in a different way to the same crisis. So, like I say, every team level, and keeping the crisis clear for different levels of the organization is key. That is how we're cutting through the chaos, particularly in different levels within the organization. So every team level only has the information that they need to do what they need to do. Less information for specific levels increases clarity. So they're only seeing what they need to see. They're not being confused by extra information that they don't need. Flexibility. So if we need to suddenly send some information that the tactical level have up to the strategic level, like say perhaps for a media interview or whatever it might be, then that can happen very quickly and easily, and flexibility is key to be able to do that. So successful communication during a crisis with integrated collaboration tools. So collaborating and communicating in a crisis really is key. So tools can do this. Tools can do this in a number of different ways, but having a chat room, a collaboration room, is kind of what people are used to these days, to be able to chat online. There can be drawbacks from social media tools. I can go into another time, but there are some obvious advantages of having tools that are designed for crisis management, for crisis collaboration. So chatting in a secure crisis management collaboration room here is key, is good. But what we can do in tools that are designed to do this is we can categorize the kind of conversation or the kind of information that we're putting into the collaboration tool. So for example, in this example, we can label, or we can categorize each chat for different types of information. So it could be a decision made, it could be an action taken, or it could be important information. And that's very important if you're then looking back. A crisis manager is going and looking for important information to make a decision, then they can click on important information in the chat room or in the log in the tool, and they can quickly get important information out about what's going on. Equally, if they want to see all the decisions that have been made or actions taken, they can filter on those and quickly get that information without having to search through every single chat that's coming through in the chat room or in the log. So everything is automatically logged that is going through this tool as well. Equally, you can see very quickly and easily all members that are in the chat room and whether they're available or unavailable. So that's also key for getting people to do stuff. And then you can open chat rooms and have chat rooms specifically for each incident, or even for each team, or for each location, for example. So you can have those chat rooms separated keeping the clarity and reducing the chaos by having that structure in your collaboration, in your crisis management. Further, you can also potentially have pre-configured, pre-set up actions that are checklists or recommendations of what to do in a certain scenario. So when a certain crisis situation happens, duty cards or action cards, organizations have different terms for these tools, but predefined lists that have come from your business continuity plan or your crisis management plan, your emergency management plan, can be pre-configured and pre-set up, ready for planned for scenarios to occur, and different task lists, checklists for different roles within the organization are automatically called up, giving direction and giving checklists for different roles so that they can make sure that the key response is done in a very orderly and organized way. Again, this is cutting through confusion and chaos, because staff can be empowered to react to what they should be doing, but also it kind of frees up thinking space to be able to think outside of the box and respond in a perhaps more effective way, because they know that the core tasks are being done, because they can tick them off the checklist. Okay, so it really does keep an overview and follow up of the status and performance of every action. Create and maintain your own. You can create and maintain your own library of action cards or checklists ready for each scenario. You can obtain action cards relevant to handling specific types of incidents, and you can sort actions using action-based severity criteria. So if it's a more severe incident, then things can get escalated, deadlines can be set for different tasks, etc., etc. And you can control access to different content or roles depending on who you need in that crisis situation. So all these tools are there, and they're available for you to respond more quickly to a crisis scenario with more clarity and less chaos. So the whole process is really focused around pre-planning. So you have your incident in the middle of this slide here. So your planning that you've probably already done, you have your business continuity plan, or you have your business impact analysis or emergency management plan, and you're taking what you've already planned and using that to configure a response to a pre-planned scenario. So if you're planning for a cyber attack, you know what people need to do in that situation. If you're planning for a pandemic, then you know what people need to do in that situation. And that's all pre-configured in the tool, so that when the incident occurs, you can hit a button, you can create a new incident, you can then start reacting and responding, and getting teams and other roles within your organization to react and respond to that incident. Then after the incident in the middle, you can then mobilize by notifying using the same platform, and then you can manage and handle the crisis potentially with your online digital crisis room, everyone logging into the same place to manage the crisis, and then recover and get back to normal as quickly as possible. So it's the whole process. So really have a think about whether you cover all of these aspects, or whether you have any blind spots in your organization, or do you work with this kind of integrated approach from business continuity plan, pre-planning, pre-configure, and plan for different scenarios, and then react and manage and recover